Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Well, howdy folks. It's the end of the month, and so time again for another month in review. It has been a fairly busy month, so we got a lot to talk about. Let's jump right into it. And as always, we'll start off with our honorable mentions from the painting competition for members of OnePageRules Patreon. So starting off, in the solo category, Daniel Dempsey did a solid job on this Demon Barbarian. It's got great highlighting, it's got a good color scheme, and great work on the non-metallic metal for the axe blade. I am actually really surprised this one didn't make the podium. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also point out that the model submitted by Surface Tension here also did a similarly good job for the exact same reasons as Daniel Dempsey. So congratulations to the both of you for a job well done. Moving on, David D did an excellent job on his Stalker monster. When I talked about this model last month, I said that the effect on the wings would come alive through the paint job, and this is an example of it done right. The blue, the red, and the purple blend together seamlessly and give it a look like it's wispy smoke, but the colors hint that there's something arcane behind the smoke rather than just smoke from a fire. So nice job, David. The last one, Dolmagus, has a fine-looking model here, likewise using dark colors with hints of purple and blue to make the wings look like they're there, but they're not there, like something fading in and out of a dream, but also adding that ethereal element, so they seem like they materialize when the creature takes off or lands or is in flight, but otherwise they're not there. So it's a really, really good job on the wings, and also a nice use of contrast between the skin and the armor plates. It makes the details stand out, but it doesn't clash or overwhelm the model. If we move on to our unit category, Chris Payne puts out a steady stream of solid paint jobs, and here he continues with bold and strong colors while keeping the lines crisp and clean. These models, by the way, notice they only have 3 total colors. It shows that sometimes a minimalist approach can work just as well as an elaborate one. Ryan Glynn gets an honorable mention because, as I've said in the past, I'm always impressed by object source lighting. I've tried it myself, and like non-metallic metal, it's one of those techniques that I either can't really figure it out, or I'm just too lazy to put in the time and effort to finally get it right. So my hat is off to anybody who's willing to pull it off, just like Ryan has here. So nice job. Final mention in the unit category goes to Yandalf for the sole reason that he pulled off a major contrast in color, but still made it look good. Blue and magenta don't always get along very well, but here I find myself drawn to the contrast rather than repulsed by it. And what I think is equally impressive is that there are equal parts of each color. You don't have one dominating with the other acting just as an accent. Both colors share the stage, but they seem to be getting along like pen and teller. Now, if we move on to the legendary category, there's actually something to talk about this time. There were only a handful of submissions, but more than 3. So I'm going to give just one honorable mention. And hopefully, as time goes on, this category will get more and more submissions, and we can give it the same attention as the solo and the unit categories. But for this month, Bruin Thunderstruck gets the honorable mention for his work on the Saurian diorama. Shading the pink with blue is not easy, and it makes the models really stand out from the gray and green background. Plus, I'm a big fan of either the Change Demons in OnePageRules or the Tzeentch Demons in 40k, and this is their bread and butter color scheme. So, of course, there's a teeny bit of bias from me there. But anyways, congrats to everybody, both the winners and the honorable mentions, and you can see the winners over on Discord or on the OnePageRules Patreon. So now let's move on to the big news stories and happenings in OnePageRules for the month of September. First off, Mini Wargaming. Last month, Mini Wargaming announced that they would start printing and selling minis for OnePageRules. At the same time, they are developing their own tabletop wargame known as Ravage Star. And they have made a new army for that particular game, but have announced that it will be fully compatible with OnePageRules. One wonders if this means that the other factions in Ravaged Star, the Gorkog, the Amari, and the Veil-Touched, may also get OnePageRules army books officially created by Mini Wargaming. And I don't think that's too big of a stretch of the imagination, especially given that Mini Wargaming has now added OnePageRules bat reps to their channel, which means now I'm competing with one of the biggest YouTube channels in existence. Oh joy. But I did reach out to Mini Wargaming to invite Scary and Luca to come on the Line of Sight podcast and talk about their first game of OnePageRules. Now, I haven't heard back from them yet, and I'm not under any illusions that I'll hear back from them ever, but hey, at least I tried. The next item up is the Edge of Radiance campaign for the Grimdark Future. It was released earlier this month. Now, personally, I'm still working through the Malhadra campaign. We got 2 bat reps up so far, and 2 more in post-production, so I haven't had a chance to explore the Edge of Radiance, but anyone who plays Eternal Dynasty or Alien Hives now has a named character to add to your army, as well as a unique STL or miniature for that specific hero. Now, while we're on the subject of books coming out from OnePageRules, the Age of Fantasy World Book dropped this month as well. Yes, I have bought a copy. No, I haven't read it yet. I'm still working on my deep dive video series from the Grimdark Future World Book, and I am way behind on that one as it is. So I'd like to get that completed before turning my attention over to this new world book. However, I did flip through it to look at the art because, pretty pictures. The art is fantastic. I love the style. It's somewhere between animation, a comic book, and a formal painting. The artwork is really well done, and if the writing even matches a fraction of it, this is going to be a very good read. The next and possibly biggest thing to point out for this month is the new yearly update for the rules is out. Now, OPR for a while was going to go with twice-a-year updates, but after that little snafu with an early release of 3rd edition, I can see why they're going to move to a once-a-year update. What that does mean is that when the updates come out, they're going to be a lot bigger. So I hope to get a video out on the new update, specifically focusing on the new update in the next week. It might even just be an unscripted video because there is so much to talk about, and the unscripted they're a little faster to produce. I find myself a little bit pressed for time, and so that might be the best way to get that out and introduce everyone to the changes and maybe give a little bit of commentary about it and then hear what you think about it as well. Moving on to other tidbits of information. For those of you who are in Europe, OPR will be at Spiel, the massive gaming convention that takes place in Germany. Hopefully, OPR will get lots of exposure, more people will discover the game, and the community as a whole can grow. And one of the things that might make that possible is, what's this? A boxed starter set for OnePageRules? Very interesting. As I've mentioned before, most people who complete that semi-annual survey say they're not interested in buying physical minis, but those are people already in the game. This is for bringing in new people, and I'd say one of the biggest challenges in bringing new people is they don't have minis. If they're not coming from another war game or have something existing to use already, they might not have any kind of figures or miniatures at all. And while buying them from third parties can be expensive, you could always go the 3D printer route, but not everybody has one of those. So I think having this little box set is a really good idea to have at the convention to get people to try out the game with a minimal investment. I know personally I bought lots of 2-player starter boxes. Some of them I still play, others not so much, but I would never have been able to test out the game had it not been for a small 2-player starter set. So I think it's a really good idea. The next question is, though, is this just the beginning? Will there be other boxes eventually? Will there be starter set boxes for armies? Is this the beginning of OnePageRules selling miniatures and not just STL files? Would that be a good thing or a bad thing, do you think? Or is this simply a way for them to make it a little easier to get people into the game at a convention where they can buy a nice packaged starter box set for relatively inexpensive, and then from there, let them develop their own way of finding models, whether it be 3D printing, collecting from other games, who knows? So closely tied to that question was the announcement that OnePageRules will also be selling hard copies of the World Book at Spiel. So again, Is OPR starting to dip its toe into the real world and come out of just the digital universe? Or is both the starter box and the hardcover book simply practical steps for attending a big gaming convention? People love to come away from conventions. I know I do, with bags full of stuff. And if you visit a vendor and all you can come away with is a card with a QR code to visit their My Mini Factory page, that's just not going to cut it. So that brings us to the last item in every monthly review, the STL reviews for the files that were released in the month of September. So this month, we'll start off with some scatter terrain that's been released that has an urban or an industrial theme to it. This would be all you need for a small skirmish game. You'd probably want some bigger pieces for larger games of Grimdark Future, but this is definitely a good starting point. Now, what I'm wondering, at least when I first wrote this, and now that I'm recording, I can ad-lib a little bit. I was wondering if these sets are part of the new biomes and terrain rules that are part of the new edition update, because the new edition update talked about army terrain. And I wondered then, is every army going to get pieces of terrain? Are we going to go the route that Age of Sigmar went for a time, where armies could bring something specific to their army that would give their army a bonus? I can now answer that question, having looked over the new rules update a little bit. The answer is no. These terrain pieces are simply to make your board look nice, to unify it with a theme between Gaming Mad and pieces and other terrain bits and all that stuff. But no, there will not, at least not from what I've read, be pieces of terrain that are specific to individual armies or factions. Moving on, this month's hero model for Quest breaks the chain of casting against type. In previous months, we had demon barbarians and undead paladins, but here you've got a vampire rogue, and what's more fitting for a class that lurks at night than a faction that lurks at night? Not complaining here. The model looks good, and it would be a fantastic assassin model in any Quest game, fantasy game, D&D adventure, whatever. I was just a little surprised that it's not following this previous pattern of taking two otherwise very, very unlikely pairings and putting them together. Next up, we have the High Elf fleets. Now, these gliders, I think they look good. One of my criticisms about the entire High Elf fleet model line was that they didn't look very sci-fi, and with the right paint scheme and weapon loadout, they could pass for fantasy. Not these guys. Those wings definitely mark them as sci-fi, but they still look very elegant, very high elfy, if such a word exists. Moving on, the elemental protectors also look pretty good. Those cannons definitely look intimidating and powerful. The aesthetic does remind me an awful lot of the 40K Avatar of Cain, the old metal model that they used to sell. Now, that may have been in the inspiration for it. That may have been intentional. It may not have been. That was just my first thought upon seeing them. Moving on to the Shadow Stalkers. I think these phantoms look pretty good, though there is a lot of detail there. Between the smoke, the multiple arms, weapons, the shield, the totems, there's a lot going on. That seems to be a bit of a departure from the previous models in the range. So folks planning on collecting these will want to budget a bit more time to paint them to the same standard as you've been doing everything else in your collection. Now on the flip side, you could use slap chop or a lot of dry brushing to get these swarms here done quickly. You know, these don't look like what I would have thought for Shadow Stalkers, to be honest. I don't know what I was expecting, but these are basically caterpillars or slugs, and that's not what I would have expected. It doesn't seem very shadowy to me. They don't have eyes, so that fits in with the rest of the army theme. But I guess I was expecting something more ethereal, wispy, something like from a dream or maybe a nightmare to match the rest of the army. At the very least, something more bipedal, like a little gribbly, a goblin, something. I don't know. I'm not doing a very good job explaining myself here. Everything in the army has spindly legs or no legs at all and glides on a cloud of wisp. These seem more like swarm critters for alien hives than Shadow Stalkers, but that's just me. Now for these behemoths, on the other hand, they definitely fit in with the rest of the army, and those massive bony outgrowths on their shoulders serve two purposes as I can see it. Number one, they're there to prevent the model from looking too much like a Saurian. Seriously, cover them up, look at the model, it looks like a Saurian hero or monster. So it's important those are there. Second, since they aren't wings or appendages, they add this kind of creepy element that makes the army what it is. Like, what are those things? Why are they there? They give that whole feeling of just something's out of place here. And that really helps it to join with the rest of the models. So I think that's really good. I suppose there's a third reason that it can carry home grocery bags and dry cleaning while keeping its hands unencumbered. Perhaps. I don't know. Overall, though, I like the way they look. Next up, we have the Army Banner Bearer, and I think he looks really very unique. I think those things that he's carrying up is what you'd call a censer, like you would see in a religious service, something like a priest would swing around in the church, only this one's held aloft. So it's different. It's not cloth, it's not hide, it's not your typical banner. It's unusual, which makes it not creepy, but odd, different, maybe even a bit unsettling. But that's the whole point of the army, so I think it fits right in. Now, the last model for this month is this Titanic model for the Blessed Sisters. So it was impressive. Yes, this looks like something titanic and imposing, and there is no mistake which army this Titan belongs to. It's like a giant podium or a terrace, like the balcony where the Pope can look over the Vatican Square. Only this one is for the sisters. Now, there's lots of good detail. Visually, it's stunning. I do have a couple criticisms, though. First, I don't see how this thing moves, attacks, or presents any kind of serious physical threat. With a Titanic model, you should be able to clearly see everything that's going to kill you, whether you're up close or from afar. But this statue looks simply like a prayer tower or like some kind of monument. It gives the impression of being like a mountain. It's solid, it's strong, but it's totally unmoving. I went and took a peek back at the unit card in the Army Forge, and the Blessed Sisters Titan is supposed to have guns, cannons, a half a different dozen melee weapons, and the thing stomps. This model doesn't look like it does any of those things, either the way it's presented right now on My Minery Factory or as options. And as I said before, it doesn't look like it can move, let alone stomp. This would be a fantastic piece of terrain, maybe part of a fortification or a stronghold. And it is Titanic, but it doesn't seem to me to be a Titan. And on top of that, I gotta ask, what's going on down there? There's a speaker's pulpit at the top of the model, but apparently to approach the throne, you lift up the skirt. I'm a bit hesitant to ask what kind of offerings are expected here and what kind of blessings and dispensations issue forth, if I may put it that way. Ew. So overall, it's a beautiful design. I just don't think it represents what the datasheet conveys as well as perhaps it could. So, there you have it, folks. Another month of OnePageRules, and a busy month at that. So now, you tell me, what's next for you guys? Reading the Age of Fantasy Worldbook? Playing the Edge of Radiance? Starting a collection or adding to your High Elf fleets or Shadowstalkers? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, keep your dice on the table, and remember, it doesn't have to be perfect, as long as it's good enough.